As the current scribe of the Academia, not only does Alhaitham copies down documents, he also copies other characters' kit. All jokes aside for his role in the game, he's got all the good stuff. Strong Dendro DPS, great on-field application, and most importantly, he's hot. Today, we're going to be discussing on whether you should be pulling for Alhaitham or not. Alright, let's do this. Hey, yo, what is going on, guys? And welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. And today, as you can see, we have the smartest man in Genshin Impact featuring in our video. Oh, sorry, wrong guy. I meant this guy, Kavi's boyfriend, roommate, will be showcasing what he's got in his talents and builds. Of course, before we get started with the video, make sure you guys hit that like button as well as subscribe to the channel for more of these type of videos. We're super close to our goal, so let's hit it by the end of this month for a special video. Alright, let's not waste some time here and let's jump into it. So here are Alhaitham stats, and as you can see, the highlight for my build is, you may notice, he has some high EM, which we will be getting into in just a second. As well as here's his crit ratio, pretty solid. So those are the overview for his stats. Now, let me explain how all of this goes down, and let's start off with the talents. So for his normal attacks, nothing too crazy about it, besides like infusing Dendro damage with okay-ish multipliers. It's not significant since majority of his damage comes from his elemental skill, but still a solid talent to upgrade. Now going on to, in my opinion, his most important part of his kit, his elemental skill. So we're just going to read this real quick. The universality and an elaboration on form. He rushes forward, dealing Dendro damage to nearby opponents. When the rush ends, causing a chisel-like mirror to form. Holding the skill will cause to behave differently. For those who has Kaching, this may sound very familiar. It pretty much works exactly the same. Just a little bit of more complexity with additional effects. So basically, what I mentioned before about the whole mirror stacking mechanic is called the Chisel-Light Mirror. And when the skill is unleashed, Alhaitham will generate one Chisel-Light Mirror. If there are no mirrors at this time, he will generate one additional mirror. Chisel-Light Mirrors will have the following properties. When he possesses Chisel-Light Mirrors, Alhaitham's normal charge and plunge attacks will be converted to Dendro damage. So any stack, you'll get Dendro damage infusion. This cannot be overridden. That's W. When attacks are aforementioned kind of hits opponents, the Chisel-Light Mirrors will unleash a projection attack that deals AoE Dendro damage based on the number of mirrors on the field. A total of 3 Chisel-Light Mirrors can exist at once. The Chisel-Light Mirrors will disappear one after the other time and will all disappear when Alhaitham leaves the field. So just a general base rundown. Similar playstyle with Kaching. You have up to 3 stacks you can get, and the most you can get is 3. And when you do, you'll launch every other projectile attack, dealing AoE Dendro damage. And if you leave the field, you will lose all the stacks. So here are his multipliers. So this is basically just like the initial casting skill damage. And here is the attack interval. Every 1.6 seconds, you will start to see the extra AoE Dendro damage based on how much Chisel-Light Mirrors you have. And that's why it is very, very, very important to maintain as much stacks as you possibly can. So obviously, as you can see here, the more you have, the more damage you deal. And then each duration is every 4 seconds. So when you start to see one of the Chisel-Light Mirrors, there is a way to recover a mirror stack. We'll be talking about that in a moment. And here's a cooldown, it's 18 seconds. But don't worry, his duration is quite long, because if you do the math here, 4 seconds, right? Times by 3, that's about like 12 seconds lasting. Another cool thing about his gameplay-wise that does have a little bit of difference compared to Kaching, whenever you hold aiming for up or down, you can actually do a following plunge attack and gain another Chisel-Light Mirror. So instead of starting with 2, now you can have 3, which is uptime for maximum projectile damage. To simply put all this, you just want to maintain 3 Chisel-Light Mirrors as much as you can to output a lot of Dendro DPS. Alright, so moving on to his Elemental Burst. The particular field fetters of phenomenon basically creates a particular binding field and deals multiple instances of AoE Dendro damage. If Chisel-Light Mirrors exist when this ability is unleashed, all such mirrors will be consumed and increase the number of damage increased instances dealt. So again, this may sound very familiar to those who hold Kaching. Actually, it's basically the same thing, but has a very, very cool mechanic behind this. So 2 seconds after this ability is unleashed, if you have 0, 1, 2, or 3 mirrors were consumed, Alhaitham will generate 3, 2, 1, 0 new mirrors in turn. So this actually corresponds based on how much mirrors you start off. After casting your ability, then you gain whatever you had previously. So basically, let's just say, for example, you start off with 0 Chisel-Light Mirrors, but you cast his Elemental Burst, you'll end off with 3. And same thing with 1, then you go with 2, the 2 to 1, and 3 to 0. So as you can probably kind of guess, right? If you want to, like, just for example, in a situation where you want to do as much burst damage as you possibly can, that means you want to cast your burst. As soon as you have 3 mirrors available, you'll deal a lot more attack instances, which obviously means more burst damage. But when it comes to certain situations, depending on what you want to do, if you want to like last on field with Alhaitham more, then you want to start off with 0, then you end up with 3 stacks, so that means you end up being able to go on field dealing more extra projectile damage. So here's the basic attack instances, and you know, it's very simple, right? You start off with 0, you get only 4, but when you have 1, you get +2. When you have 2, +4, and then, you know, +6, etc. Energy cost is 70, which is kind of expensive, but again, it's not too bad once you have, like, you know, certain team comms and decent energy management. Here's a single instance damage, but obviously it's multiplied when, you know, depending on how much instances you have available. So that's how his bursts work. It's a very, very cool utility ability, and if you can use this wisely in battle, this will greatly enhance Alhaitham's combat ability. And overall, all these talents here, I mean, well, like what I said, they're all very strong talents, right? However, you actually don't need to invest in them too much. Only leveling these talents up will increase Alhaitham's personal damage. But Alhaitham's damage actually comes from his reaction damage. It's still solid to upgrade though. I would still personally recommend to upgrade his talents because, you know, most of the times you're going to be using him on the field anyway. So, alright, so moving on to A1 passive. When Alhaitham charging or plunging attacks its opponents, they will generate 1 Chisel-like mirror. This effect can be triggered once every 12 seconds. Oh, it's called the forecasual correction. So, like what I mentioned before, there is another way to generate a Chisel-like mirror. This is one of them. And if you take advantage fully of this passive here, it is a very, very, very good passive because if in certain combinations, if you optimize it correctly, you can basically maintain 3 Chisel-like mirrors longer. So the whole idea is it's just another free source of generating Chisel-like mirrors. Again, great passive, but sometimes very easy to miss out on. So I will make sure to trigger it whenever you immediately notice you already have 2 stacks. Trigger this passive so do either charge a plunging attack and more uptime for 3 Chisel-like mirrors. Now for his A4 passive, Mysterious Laid Bare. Each point of Alhaitham's element mastery will increase the damage dealt by projection attacks in a particular field, feathers of phenomenon by 0.10%. The damage of both aforementioned abilities can be increased by a maximum of 100% this way. So, this additional EM scaling for his kit, which is exactly why I said he is going to be relying a lot on reaction, which is why I also mentioned he has a lot of EM in this build, because this is additional EM scaling to his kit, which is obviously like really important for enhancing his damage. So this will mainly fall into the artifact section on what you want to build in terms of stat wise, but I already kind of just briefly explained on why you really want EM though. But anyways, both are good passives. Now moving on to his exploration passive, Law of the Reductive Overdetermination. When Alhaitham crafts weapon essential materials, he has 10% chance to receive double the product. Yeah, it's one of those, but it's very good though. It's very good passive to have. Alright, so let's now move on to Constellations. Starting with C1, Intuition. When a projected attack hits an opponent, universality and elaboration on forms cooldown is decreased by 1.2 seconds. This effect can be triggered once every second. This basically shortens his skill cooldown, which can be situationally great, but not necessary to have. Alhaitham already has flexible rotations for field time, especially with his elemental burst being able to refresh his Chisel-like mirror stacks, hence making this constellation pretty redundant. But in certain situations, it can be kind of nice when you're extending his on-field time. Alright, so C2, Debate. When Alhaitham generates a Chisel-like mirror, his elemental mastery will be increased by 50 for 8 seconds, max 4 stacks. Each stack's duration is counted independently, and this effect can be triggered even when the maximum number of Chisel-like mirrors has been reached. Great constellation because he's basically gets a free 200 EM buff, and this is pretty easy to fulfill. Always nice to have strong stat buffs like this, because again, Alhaitham benefits greatly from stat buffs like EM. Alright, so C3, Negation, increases the level of his elemental skill, which is very great. C4, Elucidation. When a particular field feathers of phenomenon, so that's his elemental burst, is unleashed, the following effects will become active based on the number of Chisel-like mirrors consumed and created this time around. Each mirror consumed will increase the elemental mastery of all other nearby party members for 30 for 15 seconds, and each mirror generated will grant Alhaitham a 10% Dendro damage bonus for 15 seconds. The pre-existing duration of the aforementioned effects will be cleared if you have a particular field feathers of phenomenon again while they are in effect. So, basically, this constellation may sound awesome, but in most situations, you'll likely start with your burst with 0 mirrors, which I'll explain on, I'll elaborate on why, but for now, so you'll be increasing the Dendro damage bonus to himself. The EM buff from consuming mirror stacks can be very helpful depending on what teammate you're using. Otherwise, it's a solid constellation that gives more buffing from his burst. But if you do have certain teammates that can really benefit from this, and you just happen to have like 3 stacks in your elemental burst, and then you end off with 0, then, you know, when you swap off, it's a smooth transition constellation to have. Or obviously for the personal DPS increase, this is very nice as well. Actually, this kind of like reinforces even more once we get to the further constellation. So C5, Sagacity, increases the 3 levels to his elemental burst, which is nice. And C6, the big one. Alright, here we go. Structuration. Alhaitham gains the following effects. 2 seconds after his burst is unleashed, he will generate 3 Chisel Light Mirrors regardless of the number of mirrors consumed. If Alhaitham generates Chisel Light Mirrors when their numbers have already maxed out, his crit rate and crit damage will increase by 10% and 70%, respectively for 6 seconds. If this effect is triggered again during its initial duration, the duration remaining will be increased by 6 seconds. So this is definitely his strongest constellation. After using his burst, regardless of how many Chisel Light Mirrors you have, so forget about the whole rule, you get basically 3 back anyway, and crit buffs. You can also increase another 6 seconds if you max it out their mirrors, which is pretty easy. Basically, how I would do this to maximize the value of this constellation is use his burst and gain 3 stacks. As soon as 1 disappears or 4 seconds pass, then either trigger the A1 passive or use his elemental skill to regain and maintain the stacks. The way you can also extend the crit buffs from C6. Overall, this is a very powerful constellation and definitely worth to get for whales, obviously. Overall, his constellations are pretty strong though. But pretty much 99% of the characters I talk about in these videos are fine without them. None of these constellations change its gameplay that much. But they do provide powerful staff buffs like C2, C4, and C6. They're all very good. It's all mainly staff buffs though, but pretty much you get everything you need in his base kit and nothing particularly changes his gameplay. And his damage is already pretty strong at C0. Alright, so this time we're gonna start with the artifacts section. Just to justify what weapons to use, I would recommend inserted builds. Alright, so for the sets you want, in my personal recommendation, I will go for a 4-piece Guild of Dreams if you had a user with a 4-piece Deepwood user. If you do not have a 4-piece Deepwood user on your team, then I will give 4-piece Deepwoods to Alhaitham because 4-piece Deepwood is his best in slot. But it's recommended when you have Guild of Dreams. This will basically increase his damage ceiling even further, although 4-piece Deepwood is his best slot. If you don't have a teammate with enough pieces for Guild of Dreams to complete the set, then you can go for the 4-piece Deepwood on him. It's still very good. It is his technical best in slot. But then again, it depends on what you currently have on your team as well as substats. 4-piece Deepwood is also the best option if you're going to be using him for on-field driver, which is a viable option that you can definitely use. Another 4-piece build, if you are interested in doing elemental burst damage for Alhaitham, is obviously going to be to go to 4-piece Emblem, which, you know, obviously specializes in burst damage based on how much ER you have. Stat-wise, it's kind of different as well. But if you want to try that, that's always an option. For the 2-piece set, basically, like what I've been saying and emphasizing in this whole video, he scales really well with EM. So obviously, you may want to go with the 2-piece EM of 2 sets. So it doesn't matter what set you can use. You can use Flower of Paradise of Lost, Guild of Dreams, or even Wanderer. It's somewhere. I don't have it. But yeah, basically, anything that gives him EM from 2 times piece set, that's my personal recommendation. Or you can go with the 2-piece of EM and 2-piece of damage 0 damage bonus for a more personal DPS increase for Alhaitham. Basically, as long as like substats wise it works, then prioritize substats more than the set effect. Now moving on to the substats that you definitely want for Alhaitham. It's pretty much standard DPS stuff. You want crit, and you actually want to prioritize more of EM than attack, because I already explained he scales a lot higher with reaction damage. So basically same idea, except prioritize EM more than attack. If you're going to go with burst build, then you definitely want more ER since he costs like 70 energy. And for energy recharge, overall, I would recommend personally 140 to 150%. It will be even better if you had another Dendro user for him, just so you can maintain his elemental burst every single rotation. Alright, now that is about it for subsets. Let's move on to the main stats. So for his sands, definitely go with the Elemental Mastery Sands. 90% of the times, you're going to be using an Elemental Mastery Sands over attack. Unless you're going for an on-field driver Alhaitham, then attack would be better. Even EM is still fine for that, so it doesn't really matter too much. Most of the times, you're going to be using EM on Alhaitham anyway. And then for the main stats, you want the standard, right? Dendro damage bonus for the Goblet and crit circlet. So for these alternative main stats, if you don't have it, you can go either EM for both of these, and that'll definitely help. If you are going to go for him, like, triggering, like, blooms as well, then you could actually go with triple EM, which it's not really my personal recommendation, but you definitely can. And yeah, those are the stats for the artifacts. Let's go and move on to weapons, which luckily Alhaitham has a lot of free-to-play friendly options, starting with the 3-star weapons. I would only recommend Harbinger of Dawn, which is a fantastic weapon for him since he doesn't really need that much attack, but a lot of crit value from this weapon is what makes this a great option. However, this weapon's giant weakness is you do need to be above 90% of your HP so you can get this full passive here and you gain a lot more crit value from this. So it's pretty much nearly required if you're going to use this weapon. You want either a shielder or a healer to maintain this weapon's passive. Now moving on to the 4-star weapons, I would recommend, if you have it, Tokuba Shigeru. which is pretty much, in my opinion, overall the best free-to-play weapon to use, but it is an event-exclusive weapon, so for those who missed out, this was from version 3.3. So if you don't have this, don't worry, we still have another great option to use, which is Iron Sting. Both of these weapons, in terms of like DPS comparison, they're extremely similar. It's just if you care about like which one performs which in certain situations, this does better in single target, while this is better in AoE. But overall, very great options to use for Alhaitham. If you have any of these, definitely use it on Alhaitham. Another option you could use is Black Sword, since he would like to have crit stats and additional healing, but it is a BP weapon, so not a lot of people will have it, or it's likely used on other characters that you have. For the ER weapons, you can use either Festering Desire, which I actually don't have here, or you can use Favonius Sword, which they have certain benefits. Favonius is more for overall team ER, while Festering is more for personal DPS. If you have it, you can also use Zyphel's Moonlight, which aesthetically looks the best on him. It is also pretty similar to Favonius, but more for a personal increase to Alhaitham's DPS due to its EM scaling passive and subsets. Pretty great utility weapon for, again, overall team energy regen. And for the 5-star weapons, pretty much everything that has crit or EM as substats works very well on him. Obviously, his signature is his best in slot. If you have Primordial Jade, Mist Splitter, and Harang Gepaku Futsu, all are great options if you do have them. And for the Freedom Swarm is more for team buffing, which is overall an increase in team DPS, which can be great depending on who you are using on your team. Alright, now, let's move on to Alhaitham's teams. Alright, so for Alhaitham, since he is Dendro, he has a lot of team comp options, but I'm going to start off with, in my opinion, his strongest, which is Quicken/Spread. This is to maximize his spread DPS output, and the main idea is you pretty much want to consist Dendro and Electro. And there are many other options to choose from. Starting with the Dendro supports, obviously Nahida being the best option here for an offensive support. We already know what she's capable of, so she's no doubt one of the best with Alhaitham. If you want a defensive option, then you can use Baizu if you have him. You know, he's a shielder and also has healing, which, you know, Alhaitham doesn't necessarily need the shield, but the healing does come in clutch whenever you do need it. If you don't have any of these two, or they are using a different team comp for your Abyss, then my next option would be Yao Yao. She is a healer and has also great application with whenever you come with her elemental burst, so she's also super great. If you also have Kirara, which I do not have her, but if you have her, she's a Dendro shielder, which again can be very nice for a defensive slot that you could use. Pretty much nearly every single Dendro character can work as long as they benefit Alhaitham's on-field time, as well as gives what he needs, like either offensive buffs or defensive buffs. Unless they take up a little bit too much more field time, then rotation-wise it could feel sometimes a little bit awkward to use. Now for the Electro options, which again, there's a lot of options that you can do. So Official, obviously, she's just probably the best to go for. I mean, what else can I tell you? She's a 4-star Electro character, which is more accessible for a lot of players. She is a battery. She also has a sub DPS, powerful off-field application as well. Just very easy to use and very easy to slot in. Obviously works really well with Alhaitham. If you do have Yaimiko, she pairs really well in this team. She, you know, has easy, flexible off-field electro application. Also scales pretty well with teams like his because she scales with EM. If you want a defensive/utility character, then you can also go for Kuki Shinobu. She can trigger certain reactions, or she's a great healer for your team. If you also have Beidou, she pairs pretty well because of her burst damage is triggered from the Alhaitham's normal attacks. And yeah, the list just basically goes on and on. The whole idea is use anyone that can apply Electro off-field, unless they can quip swap rotation-wise, but mostly it's a lot easier if you have an Electro character to keep on reapplying Electro, so Alhaitham can just keep on triggering reactions. And those are the main idea for this team. If you don't have enough of the Electro characters to slot in, or I guess if you don't need a Dendro character as well, there's a 4th slot option that you could use for flex. Characters such as Zhongli or Kazuha, anyone that can like provide more to the team. So like Kazuha being elemental buff and CC, or Zhongli being the universal shield. Most times Alhaitham only cares about just constantly doing reaction, which is why I recommend just Electro and Dendro for an easier experience. But having a 4th flex option is also a great option for Alhaitham on this team. As long as you have at least one Electro and Dendro character, then this team will function fine for Alhaitham. Up next, if you are building Alhaitham for mainly on-field driver/hyper build, then another team you could go for is the Hyper Bloom/Quick Bloom. As we all know, it's required for you to at least have one Dendro, Hydro, and Electro characters to trigger Hyper Bloom reaction. Due to Alhaitham's constant Dendro application and on-field time, you may want someone that can apply a lot of Hydro both on and off field, and I would suggest Xing Shou, which we all know how great he is. Works very well with Alhaitham, of course. You also have Yelan. You You can use her as well. Powerful Hydro DPS and application with buffs. You can also use Kokomi, but she does have a slower Hydro application. But she does provide defensive utility, which is the healing. And you can also maintain extra off-field Hydro application off-field. It is also recommended that if you want to use Kokomi on this team, then you may need another Hydro character to maintain extra Hydro application and to keep up with Alhaitham. Like always, those are the best options if you have. If not, then you can use any other Hydro character that doesn't need too much field time, but they won't be the best compared to what I mentioned earlier. For Electro, you pretty much only use the two options as of right now for Hyper Bloom, which is either Cookie Shinobu or Raiden Shogun. Use whichever is available for you. And then for the fourth slot, it's Flex. So basically for me, it's Yelan being the Flex here for extra Hydro application. But you can pretty much use anything that you want. You can use a CC or buffer or defensive support. If, for example, you have two Dendro characters, then you can definitely go for a different 4-piece set for Alhaitham. So you can go for maybe like sometimes this set so you can trigger certain blooms. Or you can just have this, so you end up like buffing extra damage for Alhaitham for himself. But this is only if you have another Dendro character. Most of the times, if you're going to be on-field driving with Alhaitham, you're going to be using 4-piece Deepwood, so you can decrease Dendro res for your Hyper Bloom trigger. For my case, this is what I would use. It will be Alhaitham, Yelan, and Xingqiu for the Hydro application / DPS, and then Cookie to trigger the Hyper Bloom and heal. Or let's just say you replace Cookie Shinobu with Raiden Shogun, then you're going to need a healer / shielder, which then you can slot in Kokomi to one of these two to keep your team alive. That is the whole base function on building this team. Now for the next ones, which in my opinion I wouldn't use, but it's always an option to try out. You can use him for Burgeon, which is the same idea as Hyper Bloom, but replacing Electro with Pyro. This team isn't his strongest, but it is viable. So same roles for the Hydro / Dendro supports, but for Burgeon unit as of right now, I would only recommend Toma if you have him. He's just the most consistent right now for triggering Burgeon reactions. And for Flex, I will just have a defensive utility character like a shielder / healer due to self-inflicted damage. Unless your Hydro character is a healer like Kokomi, then you can run an offensive / CC unit for Flex. But basically, same team building function as Hyper Bloom. Use whatever character roles they offer that basically keeps the team healthy or benefits overall team DPS. Alright, for Nilou teams, let's just pretend Barbara is Nilou. Alhaitham is also an option, but you will be triggering most of the reactions due to his long on-field time. So you will definitely need a strong healer that can heal Alhaitham off-field. So someone like Yao Yao is a solid option to use, or Kokomi if you have, or Barbara obviously would all decently work. And obviously for Nilou teams can only be consisting of Dendro plus Hydro characters. Pick the roles that varies for your team that benefits the same rule that I mentioned earlier. Alright, and those are for the team comps. Now let's just move on to the showcase, which I would probably only showcase like two of my favorite team comps that I like to use for Alhaitham. Alright, so let's start off with the spread team here real quick. So we're gonna grab these guys here. We're gonna start with Bice's thing. Beto. Gonna have them come teleport back to me again. Okay. Then get the 3 Chiselite Mirror stacks for Alhaitham. Then charge attack. There we go. There you go. And then we can skill if we want to maintain the 3rd stack. There you go. So as you can see, I got like 5 projectile attacks from that, and that's the whole idea you want to go for. So then after that, when I see there's a little bit of downtime, I swap back to my teammates. So regain buffs. And fish. Whatever. And there's a little bit of cooldown increase here. So that is when C1 can be sometimes helpful. There you go. And one more time. Okay, now reapply again. And boom. Alright, here we go. We're gonna reapply here, so we get full 3 stacks again. There we go. There we go, and then do this. There you go. Very nice damage, as you can see. That's the whole idea. I mean, if I were to properly actually play this, then I could definitely do a little bit better in terms of like actual demonstration wise. But other than that, that's like how I would usually maintain with Alhaitham's personal spread DPS. Alright, so now on to the Quicken Showcase. Here we go. We're gonna go here. Apply some Hydro. Get some of that down. Get Cookie Sting. And go Alhaitham, and then just start doing this, and then basically that's when you'll be able to trigger some of those reactions. And as you can see, it's actually doing solid damage too. And if you notice, you gotta reapply again, so swap off field obviously. And you know, start with your teammates' abilities. And yeah, that's the whole idea with this, basically. That's the general idea that you want to do with this team. Although, to be fairly honest, I am kind of doing a lot more damage because of the Elon, but that is the whole idea, that you want to be doing this. There we go. Let's go here. I need some battery for Yelan. As you can see, we're doing solid damage here. And yeah, pretty nice. It works. And there you have everything about Alhaitham. As you can tell, he is a powerful Dendro DPS, which is, as of right now, quite of an uncommon role to have. With the right teams and builds, you can see him perform pretty well in any combat situation. Alright, let's jump into the pros and cons, shall we? Starting with the pros, he's very strong in his role, obviously. Can easily trigger spread. He's free to play friendly, and he's decently flexible for team building. Now for the cons, only major thing I can really think of is his complexity for combat mechanics. So sometimes if you are interested in trying to maximize his DPS output, you do need to do certain type of combinations to get the extra little bit of damage in there. This is to those who wants to optimize his DPS to the max, and sometimes being a little too careless can really lose out a lot of his DPS. So you do need to be aware of how much stacks you are having so you can output damage for Alhaitham as much as possible. Honestly, that might be the only thing I could really think of. If you guys have any more things you guys want to add into that, make sure you guys do put it down in the comment section and I'll pin it. But for right now, as you can see, he has a ton more strengths than weakness, and which now falls onto the question from this video: is Alhaitham worth pulling for? My answer is yes and no. He's very good pull, and you do gain lots of value for investing in him. However, he is not a mandatory character to have on your account and is only for those who will enjoy his gameplay, especially with his advanced combat mechanics. He's a very well designed character for both aesthetic and combat in my opinion, but due to where he is placed right now for the banners, we have Kazuha currently running at the same time, or depending on what we could get in version 3.8. Other than that, that is everything I got. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys hit that like button as well as subscribe to the channel for more of this type of content. Let's hit our subscribers goal by the end of this month, and we'll do something very special on the channel. And that's all I got. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay epic and peace out.